The tourism industry is estimated to be larger than oil exports, food products, or the automobile industry. The economic gain is undeniable as tourism plays a large role in regards to international commerce. Tourism is one of the main income sources for many developing countries. The global spread of tourism in industrialized and developed states has produced economic and employment benefits across a variety of sectors related to tourism, such as construction, agriculture, and telecommunications. Using Sub-Saharan Africa as an example, in 2012, Sub-Saharan Africa had 33.8 million international tourist arrivals. As a result of tourism, it generated over $36 billion, and that accounts for 2.8% of its GDP. In addition to generating income for countries, tourism helps create jobs, which is essential for economic growth. In the Sub-Saharan African countries, tourism is responsible for 1 in every 20 jobs. According to the United Nations World Tourism Organization, international tourist arrival increased by almost 5% in 2014, which is estimated to be around 1.138 billion tourist arrivals, 51 million more than in 2013. Additionally, in 2013, international tourism generated an estimate of $1.4 trillion in export earnings. Taleb Rifai, the United Nations World Tourism Organization Secretary General, had this to say about the economic impact. Tourism has proven to be a surprisingly strong and resilient economic activity and fundamental contributor to the economic recovery by generating billions of dollars in exports and creating millions of jobs. Although tourism does bring revenue and income to countries, not all of the tourist expenditure goes directly to the visiting country. The direct tourism income for a country is calculated by the amount of money spent by tourists that is left over after deducting taxes, profits, and wages that are paid outside of the country. These fees and taxes that are paid externally are what we call leakages. For example, there are many tourists who purchase all-inclusive package tours that include hotel stay, tours, and etc. For most of these all-inclusive package tours, a large portion of the tourist expenditures do not go towards local businesses. In fact, 80% of the tourist expenditures go directly to airlines, hotels, and other services that are offered by international companies. According to a tourism leak study by the United Nations Environmental Program, it revealed that leakage in Thailand was estimated to be 70%. This means that 70% of tourist expenditures left Thailand to international companies. The estimates for developing countries are not much better, with the leakage ranging from as low as 40% in India to 80% in the Caribbean. With the amount of tourists visiting locations, accessibility must be possible and made easier for the often long bus and car rides from the airports. This influx of people using routes often helps coax investment in infrastructure development such as roads and highways, pushing developing nations towards modernization. In addition to transportation, tourism pushes development for hotels and cities to satisfy needs of achieving higher comfort levels. Touristic activity arises more restaurants and shopping malls as well to take advantage of their consumption and ability to pay for services while on their trip. Tourist satisfaction levels rise in areas of higher infrastructure development, making this an area of focus for host countries. Development and a push for structured diversification also help these locations come off as more attractive, which may increase tourist activity and contribute itself to a cycle of more economic development that builds upon existing infrastructure while also expanding upon it. There's a strong link between tourism and infrastructure development that can be seen through research, and this complex system even has evidence to show that traditional local economies benefit through a more favorable business climate. Tourism can put tremendous pressure on natural resources because with more people, there's more demand. This pertains specifically to countries where the natural resources are already insufficient for the locals. Water is one of the most essential natural resources. The tourism industry is notorious for overusing water, and this is directly a cause of hotels, swimming pools, golf courses, and a consumption of water by tourists themselves. The Mediterranean is a very popular tourist destination that attracts a lot of foreigners. It is a much drier region than other parts of the world, and as a result, tourists consume much more water when they are on vacation in the Mediterranean than they would at home. It is estimated that they use up to 440 liters a day. In comparison, that is almost double the amount of water that is used by locals in an average day in the city of Spain. In addition, environmental impacts are also a large concern. Forests, jungles, beaches, and local wildlife are disrupted to build resorts for tourists near the sightseeing attractions of the area. A large amount of land is used and overworked as tourists travel to visit. This leads to degradation and major human intervening to try to keep the areas in conditions mirroring their natural state, or to minimize the damages. From tourism to erosion, some beaches have wasted away and are now largely artificial. This requires expensive netting, barriers, and resanding to upkeep on a continuous basis. Artificial beaches also disrupt animals such as sea turtles, with the sand being too hard and compact for them to make their nests. Tourism has its effects on areas in terms of pollution as well. Litter is a large problem around cultural landmarks and attractions. This is made especially worse when there are not hired-on personnel. Security may be needed to keep tourists in check, but despite this, vandalism is still at large. The popular archaeological site of Chichen Itza in Mexico no longer allows tourists to climb it because of the degradation to the stairs and tourist vandalism along the walls of the historical site. Direct income of capital and the high-spending nature of tourism creates artificial inflation zones in countries. What this means is that businesses who are aware of areas with a high amount of tourists will inflate the prices of products and services to cater to the tourists' needs, as this is a case of price inelasticity. However, although this is a financially beneficial situation to these businesses, the locals are left with inflated prices for goods and services, which ultimately decreases their purchasing power as well. With artificial inflation, it restricts and limits the consumption habits of local residents. Another negative effect as a result of tourism is the socio-cultural degradation of developing countries. Hawaii gained administration to the United States of America in 1959 and is therefore a developed country. But by analyzing the effects of tourism on Hawaii in past decades, we can predict the effect tourism will have on currently developing countries. If we look to Disney's Lilo and Stitch, we can see hints at the cultural degradation of Hawaii through tourism. Nani is apathetic about losing her job at a fake luau. Nani is unable to find a job as a barista outside of the tourist season, and only has a chance of finding a job as a hotel concierge or a beach lifeguard. The only jobs available in this movie are heavily dependent on the service industry for tourists. In a deleted scene from the film, Lilo terrorizes tourists, concluding that,
"If you lived here, you'd understand."
Hawaii made nearly $15 billion from tourism in 2014, but this animated film teaches us that Hawaiians have had a negative view of traditional tourists since as early as 2002. Many fake luaus ignore authentic and original Hawaiian practices, existing as tourist traps for the sole purpose of raking in cash. This issue is perpetuated when most tourists fail to search for personalized or authentic local experiences in favor of nearby fake and overpriced alternatives. Although they are linked to beneficial economic growth, tourism's effect also brings about obstacles when long-term forecasts are made. Permanent damages, such as those to the land and wildlife, cannot be neglected, especially when natural resources are at stake. Such a resource-demanding industry consumes and continuously chips away at its own stability, requiring more and more financial investment to be maintained. Existing policies typically encourage tourists to visit for the countries that could be classified as being a popular destination and that rely heavily on the industry. This usually spans areas of the Caribbean, where their environment and culture are big assets of attraction. Tourism policies are typically more strict for countries that do not rely so heavily on the industry for their development. Less reliance on natural environment and more of a focus on structural attractions gives some countries a luxury in limiting their compromises and allowing them to be stricter in their protection of assets. Smaller policies or enforced rules, such as those limiting where tourists can venture, are usually made on a case-by-case basis of the area in question. Often, though, these limiting rules are only strongly enforced once damage has already been done by tourists. Though open visitation, such as the ability to climb temples, attracts tourists, the vandalization and slow destruction is something that is sure to follow if they have been made open in the first place. One recommendation is for natural land and monuments to be protected ahead of time, so that necessary important areas can be controlled better. The decision must be made on how open these areas will be, with the consequences balanced against the short-term attraction benefits. A heavy reliance on the environment and their cultural attractions for the industry means that these assets should not be wasted away. Thus, stronger policies concerning environmental protection, conservation, and pollution, especially regarding coastal areas, should be considered to protect the sustainability of the industry. A solution to limit economic leakage would be to better educate and inform tourists to what goods and services are actually locally developed. By doing so, it can be assumed that many tourists would rather purchase something that is actually unique and exclusive to the visiting country than an artificial import. This solution can impact leakage significantly because with more educated and informed tourists, their expenditures will go to local businesses that are unique, not in international companies that are impersonating local businesses. It will be impossible to limit leakage entirely, but by achieving transparency in regards to what is local and what is not, It can significantly reduce economic leakage and benefit the hosting country.